The front court of the Eastern Conference,
Yes.
we actually agree on all three. Giannis, Jason Tatum, and Karl Anthony Towns. Were there any tough choices there for you?
Not at all.
Really?
What about you?
I had one.
Which?
So Cat was a tough one.
Dude.
Look, only
That
because...
is the Boston bias.
No. Because like Mobley was the other guy I considered for that spot.
I get it.
In, in part because like the Cavs are on like a 72 win pace right now. And we're really only going to give them one all-star starter. Like that's Donovan Mitchell's the only guy on that team that's going to warrant consideration for that spot. I went with Cat. Ultimately, his numbers are significantly better. I think though, when the Cavs are starting to get a lot of national TV love now, they're getting put on these games, and I've watched a lot anyway. But Mobley impacts winning in ways that don't touch the stat sheet. Like he's got two guards in front of him, and Jared Allen's kind of the same way, backstopping that defense. But he's got two guards in front of him in Garland and Mitchell, who are not great defenders, right? Like they're smallish guards, but they look good because they've got this pterodactyl behind them, able to defend and block shots and be a versatile multi-positional player. So I was kind of, and again, it goes back to defense. I was kind of hoping that Mobley would bridge the gap there a little bit, but Towns' numbers are great. 25%,
I was gonna say, come
13 plus rebounds.
His first year in a new place, and by the way, that new place is the most unforgiving fan market in the world. And everything you're saying about Evan Mobley is 100% true. And if the starting lineup involves 7 guys, he would be in real consideration for me. I think he is definitely a reserve. But that is kind of where I think he slots in. And this is an ongoing debate about a team that's doing so well. And it was a debate with the Celtics for a long time. We remember when the Atlanta Hawks had 4 guys on the All-Star team that probably not all of them should have been on the All-Star team, but people felt like, oh, we got to give it to them. Look what they're doing this season. I have shied more away from that. Sort of the more I do this, I'd sort of just look at each individual player and say, sure, your team is a really winning team, and that impacts my decision, but I'm not looking at how many I put on from any particular team.
All right, so the guard spot is where we differed. Once again, we both had Donovan Mitchell starting. He deserves. Donovan Mitchell, like, in a vacuum, like his numbers aren't fantastic, but it's what he's doing with that team. Like
He makes that team go.
Yeah, having lower numbers is what makes that team the team that it is. He's deferring more. Garland's getting more shots. Mobley's developing his offensive game. He's bought into everything that Kenny Atkinson is trying to show this team. And again, in the fourth quarter, he's still top 15 in fourth quarter points. So he's the guy they go to get a bucket. He's a no-brainer as a starter. You went with Jalen Brunson.
I did.
As the starting point guard. I went with Damian Lillard, but this was another really tough one, not just because of Brunson Lillard, but there's like 3 or 4 guys
there are
that could easily get that backcourt slot. How tough a call was that one?
It was a very tough call for me. But the more I thought about it, look, I've been a real champion for Dame in a lot of these types of votes in the past because I just thought, especially in Portland, everyone's like, oh yeah, it's Dame time, but they kind of overlooked some of the other things that he was doing. And I think, I wouldn't tell you, you're crazy, but I do think, to me, it ended up being pretty clear of, look, I think this guy is a borderline top 10 guy in the league right now for this year, how he's playing. I think he's the unquestioned leader of that team, and he's kind of, as he goes, that's how the Knicks go. I put a lot of stock in that for the All-Star game, less for All-NBA.
He would fit your criteria of pulling a guy off, and like that team, like I don't know how long Towns is going to be out, but if Brunson went out, that team would fall apart.
Absolutely,
it did fall apart.
It did fall apart. Yes, 100%. So there we go. Yeah. And I just think also, like in this situation, if you look at Damian Lillard and tried to pull him off that team, they're still going. It's Giannis. Giannis is the engine of that team. Damian Lillard is like the really nice, I don't know about engines, but there's something, the
carburetor.
Right. No, it was, I watch Fast and the Furious, baby.
Yes.
This is the nitrous, right? So he's the nitrous that makes the team.
Nice.
That's Damian Lillard. But like, you can't do that with no engine. And Giannis is the engine.
True.
And Jalen Brunson is the engine. And his numbers are really good. I mean, I'm trying to look here. So he's shooting 53% overall. Dame is shooting 45%. He's also had an effective field goal percentage, for those of you who worship those kinds of numbers. And like last night, they had that revenge game against the Hawks. He drops 34 points. Only Jokic and Shea have had more 30 and 5 assist games, 30 points, 5 assist games this season. That's pretty damn good company.
I can't argue against him. And his durability, too. He's played more games. I think he's like 42, 43 games on this season. That I always look at that as well. Before I get to my case for Dame, like shout out to Trae Young.
Yes.
Cade friggin' Cunningham. The Cade campaign
Yes.
has been full speed over these last couple of weeks.
Yes.
He deserves a spot.
I'm glad you said Trae Young. I think there's still, there's always
Yeah.
residual weirdness in the media over Trae Young. He's leading the league by assists and not by a little bit.
know.
Go look at those numbers. It's crazy.
Lob
And
City
when
in
you
Atlanta.
I mean, go look at those numbers in historical context. Go look at Magic Johnson's numbers. Like, go look at some of the best passers of all time. He is superseding all of those in terms of per game. And when you say, oh, his defensive numbers are down, his shooting numbers are down, he's passing a lot more. And therefore, yes, that doesn't affect your shooting percentage, but it means you're touching and shooting the ball more. And some guys need to shoot more to be in that rhythm. I don't know. I'm glad you said Trae Young. That's all. He should make the All-Star team.
If you're not a Hawks watcher, watch some of these games. Watch Trae and watch Jalen Johnson. They are a lot of fun. If Atlanta can find a way to build around those two guys, they might have something in the next 2 or 3 years. The star power of Dame certainly comes into the discussion for me anyway.
Now it's star power.
It's a little bit of star. That did sway me a little bit. There's a little bit of juice. It's been a bizarro season in Milwaukee, right? Like they're all the way up and they're all the way down and they're all the way up again and they're all the way down. Like that awful start to the season. But through it all, like not much of that awfulness landed, to me anyway, on Dame or Giannis. They were playing well pretty much throughout of this start. They just weren't getting enough help from some of the guys that were around him. And like, if you watch and you look at some of these numbers, like Dame's kind of back to being Dame. Like he's not Portland Dame. Like you're never going to get that guy again. But he's giving you 25 points per game. He's shooting right around 40% from three. He's been the guy we've seen. And I guess that combination, the fact that he is Damian Lillard, that gave me just a little bit of juice, but I wouldn't begrudge anybody voting for anybody else for that last spot. Brunson deserves it. Lillard deserves it. Trae would deserve it. Cade would deserve it. LaMelo does not deserve it. I was not considering LaMelo.
So what do you
Ball
think
for
is
that
going to
spot.
happen there?
I don't see the players voting for LaMelo, and I don't think I didn't even really consider him. Like he's just on a horrible team.
But
and
do
he
you
is
think
his shot selection is wild. It is wild right now. Like it's something to watch. Like he is LaMelo unplugged. Like us let off the leash right there. He is good to go.
It's pretty fascinating. Though,
Yeah.
Because when we've run into these types of situations before, it was the last time the NBA had this at an All-Star game with fan voting. It was the international ballot stuffing, basically, that happened. If you have an entire country voting for a guy, his numbers are going to be way up, and that's actually how we got. Who was the player?
Oh, I forgot. It was from George. I'm blanking.
Right.
He's the guy who stepped on Kawhi. That was that's. I'm going to sound like an idiot, not remember. No, but the one he got under Kawhi had the rule change. You remember this?
So my point is
Crap, I
that when a
forgot.
whole country is doing that, obviously it's unfair and whatever. LaMelo, this is not a whole country doing it. It is a youth movement among younger NBA fans. And we have known for a decade now that younger NBA fans are not as aligned with teams as from our generation, right? So, if you grew up, where I grew up, you were a player, fan of that team. I heard some actor was on Conan O'Brien's show earlier, and he was saying, he's like, I grew up in Boston. Like, you're not allowed to be a fan of anyone but the Celtics. Like, those are your teams. Like, you can't change later in life. You can't change if you move somewhere else. Those are your teams. It's just not like that for most young fans, and we've seen that. They follow LeBron wherever he goes. They follow, Steph or KD. KD, obviously, is a better example of wherever he goes. This is different even from that, though. This is not, he's such a great player, I want to follow him. It's, I like him. I like the flashy things he does. I like the highlights I see on Instagram. And since I don't see the lowlights and I'm not watching full games anymore, which we've also seen from the research, he's the guy I'm going to vote for. And I'm very curious if we end up with more and more of this over the years, and if that again changes the NBA voting structure, because it's not the guys who necessarily, he's so fun, and I'm all for him, and I'm thrilled at what he's doing, but he does not belong as an all-star starter above the guys we just talked about.
I would say he's not completely unworthy because I think he's averaging 30, right? Like he's having a huge season. Zaza Pachulia is who I was trying to
yes. Thank you.
I just Googled
Yes,
stepped
thank
Kawhi
you.
foot.
Thank you, because I can remember from it.
Zaza Pachulia's name.
With all the things that have been going on in my head lately, Zaza Pachulia's name has been kicked out of the mental filing cabinet.
Not one of them. Yeah, he's done just enough to make me okay with the fans.
Yeah.
Like him, like he
I
is
just think it's an interesting big picture. I'm wondering if in 3 years you and I are sitting right here, Chris Mannix,
potentially, yes.
and having they changed the rules because of X or Y.
Yeah. The other point I had about Dame, and I wrote this in a column in SI, was for all the belly aching about his defense, like they're top 10, like in defensive efficiency.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying he's morphed into a defensive stopper, but he's done enough to keep that team in the top 10 in defense after a pretty woeful start for them on the defensive end. So like just all these little things, the slightest of edges.
But he's not the engine.
He's not the engine. You're right about that.